Your faith is not something that it's an island that you get dropped off on once you meet Jesus, and then that's where you stay. It's actually a living, breathing thing, and it takes a lifetime to work out. And Dietrich represents for me that kind of faith. He was unafraid to follow the call that he felt in his heart from God.
This is such a unique and honestly hard to believe story that's true. So for those who don't know about Bonhoeffer, could you tell us a little bit about him?
Well, the shortest version is that he was a pacifist pastor who became one of the assassins of Hitler, and in between saved thousands of Jewish lives. The longer version is that he was a singular mind and heart who stood up against Hitler first and loudest and never stopped battling evil for the last 12 years of his life. Once he saw even the earliest designs of Hitler's plan, he was the beautiful voice that stood on the hill and warned the world.
So what drew you to this story and why are you so passionate about it?
When you encounter Dietrich Bonhoeffer, you're just drawn to the guy. He's so magnetic. He's so charismatic. He's funny. He's brilliant. He's fearless, but he also is honest and candid about his doubts. He does what a pastor of mine years ago, Morris Boyd, used to say: I don't exchange my doubts for more faith. I exchange my doubts for better doubts. That your faith is not something that it's an island that you get dropped off on once you meet Jesus, and then that's where you stay. It's actually a living, breathing thing, and it takes a lifetime to work out. And Dietrich represents for me that kind of faith, which was he was unafraid to follow the call that he felt in his heart from God. And he was unafraid to put himself in the way to protect the Jews of Europe and any group that was under pressure or forgotten. He really lived out the gospel, and very few people live out what they believe.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so you had to really dive deep into this story. You had to know so much about him. What was the most surprising thing that you discovered while studying about his life?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if it was the most surprising, but it was a collection of all the qualities of the man. Uh, Usually you see a photograph of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and his hair is receding and he's got the glasses on, and he's got a little bit of a paunch, and you hear he was a great Christian thinker, and you think of, kind of someone sitting stiffly at a desk, maybe with a quill pen, and living a quiet, obscure life. He was the opposite. He lived face forward, and everyone around him said the same thing. Very, very funny. Like I said, a compelling personality, a child prodigy pianist, a brilliant mind, getting his doctorate in theology as a teenager. It's just a person that was dynamic and stood out. And that's the other thing. He had so much to lose by taking a stand, and taking a stand so early against Hitler. He came from privilege. He had his whole life laid out before him to have an easy go of it. And he didn't blink. He just said, look, this is wrong. You can't put a man at the head of the church, and especially a Führer.
Yeah.
You can't kick God to the curb and worship a man. And that's what Hitler demanded the German people do. And the German church helped him pull that off. So somebody had to say something, and it fell to Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Wow. And so you talked about just how dynamic his life was, and there's so much with, theology when he was a teenager. Was there anything in the film that you really, really loved that you just couldn't put in the movie?
That I couldn't put in the movie. Well, I was thinking, the movie is 2 hours and 6 minutes now, before the credits, and the original assembly of what I shot, cut down into scenes, was 2 hours and 52 minutes. So that means there's, more than 45 minutes that used to be in there and that were in the script that don't exist anymore. But over time, there's a distillation of what matters in a story. It happens during the script process too, and then it happens during the editing process. It becomes clear, the story itself begins to tell you, how it plays out, and the best rhythm and timing. So you've seen the film? You Can I reference something in the film?
Yes, I would
So
love.
the exchange of the Jewish prisoners at the Swiss Guard. So I could have made a whole episode of television out of this one exchange easily. It could have been an hour and 15 minutes, but you can't have a movie that suddenly stops and becomes something else. So I had to take all these secrets that were uncovered about the plot to smuggle the Jewish prisoners in, and where the money came from to supply it, and how ultimately this led to Dietrich being arrested. But it would have been a rabbit hole to go down. And even if it was done brilliantly, people in the audience would be, okay, can we get back to the actual story? So I'm not sorry it's missing, but I do think if people want to do a side journey into history, that the plot to smuggle the Jewish prisoners into Switzerland is a fascinating tale.
Jonas Jassler plays Bonhoeffer, and he looks incredible. How hard was it to cast his role? And what stood out about him?
So the easiest thing about this whole experience was casting Jonas, because Jonas was sent to me. I knew one German filmmaker, a woman named Emilia Teff, who's a terrific director. And I asked her, I'm about to cast Bonhoeffer. She knew the story, and I need a recommendation. Could you provide me with a list of the top 10 German actors that are 25 to 35? And she wrote back, Jonas Dassler. And I said, Emily, thank you. That's great. I'll check him out. It's good. Obviously, you're a big fan, but I need a list. And she said to me, he is the list. And then I watched his work, and then I met him, and he's such a beautiful soul. It was so easy to connect with him. He had a Bonhoeffer connection through his grandmother. And at the end of my hour-long Skype with him, during which we both cried, it was clear that this was the guy. But he's so humble. He said, "Oh no, you can't offer me the job. I have to audition. I'd like you to be my Dietrich." And he said, "No, no, I have to audition. So I'll send in a tape." So he did that. He auditioned, he sent in the tape, and then I was watching it with my wife. She was doing something else and sitting next to me, and then she looked over at the computer and watched the whole audition, and she said, "Well, you found your Dietrich."
You definitely did. He was perfect choice. You honestly made the right one. Hearing about this story, you talked about, even just talking with him, you got emotional. Hearing about this story, you get affected. What was it like filming? Were there any moments that really, when it just hit the gravity of this piece of history that you're telling?
Yeah, I'd single out two moments. One was when we were filming the Nazis stripping churches of all the crucifixes and images of the saints, which is what Hitler decreed. It was super upsetting to see Jesus on the cross being hauled out by Nazi soldiers, and statues smashed and windows broken, and that really happened. And it's very believable that it could happen again if we're not looking out for each other and we're not fighting against tyranny. Things are a very slippery slope. No one, if you asked in Germany, aside from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, if you asked him in 1933, do you think that Adolf Hitler is going to make himself like the Pope of Germany? You think he's going to put himself at the head of the church? No, nobody would have seen that coming. And
Right.
within a year, he did it. So that was very upsetting. And then the tears came. My precious cinematographer, John Matheson, he's just a giant, multiple Oscar nominations, and I think he's going to get another one this year for Gladiator 2. He went from my movie to go do Gladiator 2. Those are the last two movies he did.
Wow.
But when we were shooting the scene at the gallows, and It was to be shot the next day, and the construction people on the movie were building this place to put up 3 nooses. And John is British, and he's not given to shows of emotion, but he began to cry, and the tears pouring down his face. He said, if only the Allies had come a week earlier, if only Dietrich had somehow taken the opportunity to escape that was offered to him. Why did it have to end this way? And then after a short pause, he answered his own question. He said, but if Dietrich had survived the war and gone on to live a quiet life with his family in the Bavarian countryside and written, 4 or 5 more books, would we be telling his story right now? And the point was that even though it cost Dietrich the ultimate sacrifice, the story that we were telling was not Hitler's. Hitler had spent 12 years trying to silence Dietrich, and 80 years later, he still didn't succeed. Dietrich's story is the one being told, the one about love and courage and hope. That's the one that we're talking about right now. So love is unstoppable. And no matter how dark things get, light not only will flare up and illuminate the darkness, but it's always on its way to winning.
If you enjoy videos that follow your values like ours and you want to help us continue, go to movieguide.org/donate, because we're actually a nonprofit. You may not know that, but we're working in Hollywood every day to help families have more choices that follows their values. And also subscribe right now.